There's this old photograph I keep coming back to. It's from 1988. Michael Dukakis, who's running for president of the United States, is trying to look tough to prove he's commander-in-chief material. So his team has an idea. Let's put him in a tank. And they do. They put him in an M1 Abrams tank, and they put this massive, oversized helmet on his head. He's grinning, peeking out from under this comically large piece of gear, looking less like a general and more like a high school mascot who won a contest. The image was supposed to project strength. Instead, it projected, well, that. It became a national joke, the defining image of his failed campaign. It was a single moment, a single prop, but it captured this perfect fatal gap between intention and reality. And it's a gap that it turns out is littered with political careers. It's that moment when the carefully crafted performance just completely falls apart and all you're left with is the man in the silly helmet.
And that image, I mean, it just landed instantly, didn't it? Delivered by the media. It really kicked off what a lot of political folks call the age of optics, Dukakis' failure. It wasn't just, bad photo op or a helmet that didn't fit. It was a total visual meltdown. It just perfectly captured the absurdity of trying to manufacture competence instead of just showing real conviction.
Right. Like he was wearing a costume.
Exactly. Before that, leaders had, let's say, a bit more control over their story. You could put out a press release, give a speech. The message went through these more controlled channels. But here, suddenly the camera lens is the judge, jury, and executioner. The intention was strength, resolve, but the reality... A small guy just swallowed by this giant piece of military gear. It screamed weakness, hesitation, and the media, already shifting towards visuals, just amplified it massively.
That shift from the controlled message to this instant high-stakes visual performance, that's exactly what we need to dig into today. So our mission really is to trace how that political performance has evolved, from Dukakis in '88 right up to today's digital world. And see how that change has completely reshaped what you, the voter, demand from leaders. We need to pull apart the psychological traps leaders keep falling into when they try too hard to manage that image. And crucially, understand the brain science. How do our brains actually process these moments, these slip-ups, the inauthenticity? How does one bad photo, one robotic line, just lock in a perception that can absolutely sink a campaign?
It's a huge shift, a really fundamental one. And the core idea here is it's not just about policy anymore, not by a long shot. It used to be, qualifications, detailed plans, policy, substance. That was the main currency in politics.
That's what you ran on.
Right. But today, voters are clearly, often explicitly, putting emotional connection and what they feel is authenticity way ahead of just pure competence.
And the perfect, maybe most painful modern example of this failure has to be Mitt Romney's 2012 campaign. I mean, look at him on paper. He should have walked it, shouldn't he?
You'd think so.
He had this incredibly detailed, 59-point plan for the country, great business background, ran the Olympics, governor experience. His team raised over $1 billion.
$1 billion, yeah.
By every traditional measure, Romney was, the ideal candidate, yet he lost. And why? Because the feeling out there, the perception was that he was just too perfect, too untouchable.
Unreachable, yeah. His campaign is like a case study in failing on emotional optics. It wasn't about lack of money or lack of planning. Voters weren't really picking apart those 59 points. They were looking at the man.
And they felt
he lacked humanity, maybe. It boils down to 3 core things voters are searching for emotionally. 3 pillars of connection, you could say. First, does this candidate actually like me? Second, does this candidate understand people like me, understand my life? And third, the big one, can I actually trust this candidate?
And Romney, in the public eye, seemed to fail on all 3 counts, didn't he? He came across as so distant, so managed, disconnected.
Precisely. And this is where the difference between the public show and the private person gets really stark. If you watch that documentary, Mitt, the one following his campaign behind the scenes.
Yeah, I remember that.
You saw a completely different guy. Thoughtful, surprisingly candid, actually quite self-deprecating, generous. Observers called it the inner Mitt.
But the campaign didn't want that out there.
No way. They were terrified of it. They saw the campaign purely as delivering policy points, protect the candidate. They tried to hermetically seal him, keep any real emotion, any flaw completely hidden.
Which made him seem
controlled, wooden,
yeah,
inauthentic. And that failure to connect emotionally, that cost him far more than any policy difference ever could have. Voters figured, if he can't connect with me on a basic human level, how can he possibly understand what I need?
That lack of connection, it really gets to the heart of why emotion beats logic in the voting booth. This isn't just, a bad campaign strategy. It's baked into our brains, isn't it?
Absolutely.
The decision we make, it's less about what we think rationally and more about what we just feel instinctively.
And neuroscience gives us a really clear model for this. Political psychology sometimes pictures it as the brain having like blue coasts and a red center.
Yeah.
This is based on Drew Weston's work. The red center is this area called the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the VMPFC. It's deep in the brain, heavily connected. It's the hub for gut feelings, moral judgments, processing all our emotional experiences.
Okay.
And that is the prime target for political messages, the ones designed to hit you in the gut, bypassing pure logic.
And the blue coasts, those are the outer layers.
Yeah, the surrounding areas, the
Yes.
parts doing the heavy lifting on logic, careful judgment, abstract thinking, philosophy.
So the key is how fast these different parts work.
Exactly. Speed and priority. Emotion is processed way, way faster in the brain than reasoned, logical stuff. It goes back to our evolution. We basically have, 3 brain layers.
Right.
The neocortex, that's the smart analytical part, complex reasoning. Then you've got the reptilian brain, pure survival, fight or flight, raw fear.
Okay.
And then the mammalian brain, the limbic system. That's our emotional core, and critically, where long-term memory really sticks.
So when politicians talk about issues that feel genuinely threatening, healthcare costs going up, losing your job, immigration fears, economic collapse,
Dang. The reptilian brain, the survival instinct, just grabs the steering wheel.
it takes over.
Absolutely. So imagine a candidate trying to present a, logical 10-point policy plan to someone who's already gripped by a really powerful emotion, like deep anxiety about their factory closing, or maybe anger over something they see as unfair.
They just can't hear the logic.
They literally don't have the brain capacity available to process it effectively at that moment. The emotional circuits are firing on all cylinders. That VMPFC, the gut feeling center, has already made its judgment. Do I trust this person? Do they make me feel safe or threatened?
Wow. That completely reframes political communication, doesn't it?
It really does.
You're saying if you don't establish that emotional connection, that basic trust first, then all the detailed policy papers, the 59-point plans, they're just noise. Irrelevant.
Pretty much. The candidate thinks they need to win the factual debate, but they actually need to win the feeling debate first, the trust debate, the security debate.
And that's the biggest trap for these performance-driven candidates.
It's the single biggest failure point. They pour millions into policy details, white papers, when voters are just reacting to a gut feeling they get in the first 30 seconds.
And that failure to win trust, it often starts inside the candidate's own head, right? The psychological pressures that lead to self-sabotage, these candidate sins, as we're calling them.
Yeah, and these sins always reveal either a lack of self-awareness or maybe worse, just a failure of nerve at a critical moment. Let's start with the sin of tentativeness. This is really about decisiveness just rotting away. And we have to go back to Dukakis in the tank again, because his failure started internally.
How so?
Well, reports say he was really hesitant about the photo op. He thought it was ridiculous.
His gut told him no.
Exactly. But he gave in to his campaign team. He was afraid to stand up to them, to trust his own judgment.
So the photo didn't just look bad. It captured his failure to be decisive, his lack of command.
Precisely. He looked controlled, not in control, which is the exact opposite of the strength voters crave. Decisiveness is fundamental to trust. When you feel the world's chaotic, you look for leaders with strong convictions, clear resolve. Think about Churchill during World War II, that famous line, victory at all costs. Victory, however long and hard the road may be.
Right, that projected sheer determination, made people feel secure even in the darkest times.
Exactly. Or FDR after Pearl Harbor. No uncertainty there, just immediate firm conviction. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. He turned national fear into national purpose. Dukakis, by being tentative, by going along with that silly stunt against his better judgment, he projected deep uncertainty, a lack of core strength.
Okay, then the next category. The sins of arrogance and being uninformed. This is where that hubris, that excessive pride, really bites campaigns.
Oh, yeah. Hubristic pride, it blinds leaders. They can't see or admit their own flaws, which ironically often comes from a place of deep insecurity.
And when that ignorance or arrogance gets exposed.
The media and voters just punish it mercilessly because it breaks the basic promise of competence, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the examples are just unforgettable. Sarah Palin in 2008.
Right. That claim about Alaska being close to Russia, somehow giving her foreign policy experience, it was met with immediate, disbelief. And then the mockery kicked in. Tina Fey's line, "I can see Russia from my house." It wasn't just funny.
No, it was devastating.
It completely undermined her basic credibility to be vice president. It branded her as naive and uninformed, and that label just stuck, glued on.
And being uninformed about basic global facts, that seems even more deadly for a candidate.
Gary Johnson, 2016.
The Aleppo moment, yeah, that was catastrophic.
Right.
The interviewer asked him, what is Aleppo? And Aleppo, at that exact moment, was ground zero for the Syrian humanitarian crisis, a major global flashpoint. Johnson, the Libertarian candidate for president, just blanked. Couldn't identify it.
Campaign over.
Just like that.
Instantly. Voters might forgive a poorly worded phrase, maybe chalk it up to being tired, but not knowing basic world facts relevant to the job you want, almost never forgiven. It just screams, this person is less informed than I am.
Then there's that specific flavor of arrogance, the remote dismissive kind. Martha Coakley in Massachusetts, 2010.
Yes. The special election for Ted Kennedy's Senate seat, a reliably Democratic state.
She was expected to cruise to victory.
Totally. She was the attorney general, the establishment choice.
Yeah.
But then people noticed she wasn't really campaigning, not doing the retail politics thing.
And someone asked her about it.
Yeah. Why wasn't she out there meeting voters, shaking hands? Her response was just dripping with disdain. She said something like, as opposed to standing outside Fenway Park in the cold, shaking hands.
Ouch.
Big ouch. That one quote just sealed the deal. It created this impression that she felt she was above it all, had better things to do than connect with ordinary people. Her opponent, Scott Brown, drove around in this old pickup truck, shaking hands everywhere. He perfectly framed it as the regular guy versus the aloof elite.
And he won. A huge upset.
Staggering upset, all stemming from that perceived arrogance and lack of basic humility.
That failure to connect, the perceived phoniness, it leads right into the third big trap. The trap of the canned candidate.
Yeah, this is about that fatal lack of authenticity, that inability to be nimble, which modern media just exposes instantly.
Marco Rubio, 2016 primaries. He's the classic example, isn't he?
Textbook case of self-inflicted damage. Rubio's naturally a good speaker, right? Articulate, usually seems upbeat. But he massively overprepared for that New Hampshire debate.
How so?
He, or maybe his handlers, drilled this specific 25-second attack line about Barack Obama into his head, like, use this line, repeat this line. So during the debate, Chris Chrisley calls him out, says he's just repeating memorized sound bites, baits him.
At Rubio.
He walks right into it. Instead of just responding naturally, he defaults. Under pressure, he spits out the exact same memorized line, not just once or twice.
3 times.
3 times. And boom! The nickname MarcoBot was everywhere overnight.
Killed his momentum.
Completely stalled him out. The attempt to be perfectly polished made him seem totally artificial, robotic, like Romney, like Coakley in a way. Rubio's failure came from a strategy that valued scripted points over actual human interaction. When the script failed, the candidate failed. Voters felt they were seeing a performance, not a person.
Okay, so we've got the voters' need for emotional connection and these psychological traps that make candidates fail that test. Now let's flip it. Look at the voter side. Because once that first emotional impression clicks in, good or bad, it's incredibly sticky, right? Almost impossible to shift. We're talking confirmation bias.
Exactly. Confirmation bias, or my side bias, as psychologists sometimes call it, is this powerful mental shortcut that just locks perceptions in place. We are fundamentally wired to look for information that confirms what we already believe or feel.
So we feel first.
Right, that gut reaction to the candidate. Then we form our bias based on that feeling, and then we go find the facts to back it up. We rationalize after the fact.
And it's not just preferring one bit of news over another. It actually twists how we see reality, how we process anything new. The sources talk about specific effects, like attitude polarization, belief perseverance.
Yeah, let's unpack those, because they really shape how political arguments work today. Or maybe why they don't work. Attitude polarization. This means when you take people with opposing views and you show them the exact same piece of factual evidence that might even challenge their view, their disagreement actually gets stronger, more extreme.
Wait, how does that work?
They interpret the facts through their existing biased lens. So if you're a supporter, you see evidence that confirms your guy is great. If you're an opponent, you see the same evidence proving he's terrible. Think about watching a debate. A polarized viewer often sees the neutral moderator as being totally biased against their candidate. The facts get filtered.
Okay. And then belief perseverance. That sounds even worse.
It's pretty damaging.
Yeah.
That's when your belief stays firm even after the evidence it was based on is totally debunked, proven false.
So if you decide early on a candidate is, say, phony,
You'll keep believing they're phony, even if they then hold a series of really genuine, unscripted town halls. That initial emotional judgment acts like a mental shield. It just blocks contradictory evidence.
And this bias is so strong, it could even change our memories, make us misremember our own past feelings.
It's wild, isn't it? There was this study with widows and widowers. They rated how intense their grief was 6 months after their spouse died, and then again 5 years later. When they were asked at the 5-year mark to recall how bad their grief was back at 6 months, their memory of that past grief intensity didn't match what they actually reported back then. It's strongly correlated with how they were feeling right now, 5 years later.
Wow. So our current emotions literally rewrite our memory of past emotions.
Seems that way. So in politics, if you currently feel a candidate is weak or untrustworthy, you'll unconsciously reinterpret their past actions, even positive ones, to fit that negative feeling you have today.
That's terrifying for a politician. Your track record isn't fixed. It's constantly being reevaluated through the lens of the voter's current mood.
Exactly. And it explains why those little gaffes, those moments of arrogance, become so powerful. They're the perfect piece of evidence to confirm a negative gut feeling.
It's like we're actively looking for the puzzle pieces that fit the picture we already have in our head.
Precisely. And you see this outside politics, too. The example of numerological pyramidology is kind of fascinating.
Pyramidology.
Yeah. People who believe the Great Pyramid's dimensions hold secret cosmic codes. They take tons of measurements, height, perimeter, angles, number of stones, whatever. Then they crunch the numbers, convert units, look for ratios, until they find a few measurements that seem to line up, maybe with the Earth's diameter or the distance to the sun.
They find what they're looking for.
Exactly. They ignore the thousands of measurements and calculations that showed nothing interesting. They selectively pick the hits that confirm their pre-existing belief. Voters do the exact same thing with a candidate. They scan for the soundbite, the photo, the anecdote that confirms their gut feeling, and they dismiss or explain away everything else.
Okay, so if emotion rules and confirmation bias locks it in, what is the winning formula then? It brings us back to that balance, right? Strength and warmth.
It's the ultimate tightrope act. Strength, that's competence, being decisive, projecting optimism, and warmth, that's authenticity, humility, empathy, showing you connect. Most candidates naturally lean one way or the other. Think of JFK. Lots of natural warmth, charisma. He had to spend his career proving his strength, his decisiveness, especially during crises like Cuba.
Right.
Then you have someone like Richard Nixon, perceived as strong, competent, maybe even brilliant, but he constantly struggled, and often failed, to project genuine warmth or connect emotionally.
So the smart politician identifies their weak spot and actively works on it.
That's the goal, deliberately trying to balance the equation.
And within strength, that idea of optimism seems crucial. It's not just about sounding happy, is it? It's about projecting control.
Right, absolutely. It's a political necessity, really. The data is pretty clear. Studies show the candidate perceived as more optimistic won the presidency in, 18 out of 22 elections after World War II?
That's a huge correlation.
And often, more optimism meant a bigger win. It signals resilience. It tells voters, we can handle this. There's a better future ahead. It makes people feel safer.
Which leads us to the classic counterexample, Jimmy Carter's malaise speech in '79.
Carter correctly diagnosed a real national problem, a crisis of confidence, a national thunk. He was accurate. But he failed to balance that diagnosis with a powerful message of hope, of optimism, of clear, decisive action. He focused so much on the collective problems, the perceived weakness, that he became branded as weak, unable to inspire.
Compare that to, say, Donald Trump in 2016.
Perfect contrast. Trump's diagnosis of America's problems was often very negative, very dark. But he always pivoted immediately to an aspirational, simple, hopeful promise, make America great again.
That slogan focused on action, on restoring something lost. It resonated with voters feeling anxious and left behind, giving them a sense of future agency. Carter offered diagnosis without sufficient hope. This constant need for connection, for that strength-warmth balance, it brings us right up to the modern media world, where everything is faster, more immediate, Twitter, live streams. It's changed the game entirely, hasn't it? Demanding radical openness.
Totally. This is what we could call the digital intimacy paradox. Old media let politicians be curated, edited, airbrushed almost, like a formal portrait.
Yeah, very controlled.
But digital platforms, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, livestream, they demand the opposite. Instant, raw, often messy openness, vulnerability, and they amplify everything in real time. Every successful connection, every awkward gaffe, there's no buffer.
And the younger politicians seem to get this instinctively. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, she's kind of mastered this, hasn't she?
She's a prime example of using digital intimacy to completely rewrite the playbook. She deliberately pushes back against that stereotype of the calculating, hypocritical politician by live streaming totally mundane stuff, making mac and cheese in her Instant Pot, assembling IKEA furniture. It's transparent. It pulls back the curtain. And it creates this powerful feeling of authenticity and relatability that a polished campaign ad just can't touch.
It makes her seem like a real person.
Exactly. Not just a politician reading talking points.
And vulnerability itself seems to be valuable now. Beto O'Rourke, after he lost that big Senate race in Texas, he posted online about feeling lost, stuck, in and out of a funk.
Yeah, and that raw honesty, admitting struggle, admitting imperfection, really connected, especially with younger people. In an era where everyone's cynical about politicians, showing your human flaws and all makes you seem, well, less like a politician. Revealing emotional imperfection can paradoxically signal honesty, a lack of calculation.
But whether it's a tweet, a town hall, or an Instagram story, the most powerful tool is still the oldest one, isn't it? Good old-fashioned storytelling.
Always. We are absolutely wired for narrative. It's incredibly effective. Messages wrapped in a story, they can be up to like 22 times more memorable than just listing facts.
22 times.
Because stories hit that emotional, primal part of the brain we talked about. They give context, emotion, conflict. They package the message in a way that sticks. Far more persuasive than a policy brief.
And the pros, the political strategists like Mark McKinnon, they've even broken down the formula for a killer political narrative.
Yeah.
A 5-step arc.
Right. It's designed for maximum emotional impact you need. 1, the victim who's hurting. 2, the threat, what's causing the hurt. 3, the villain who's responsible, who's the obstacle. 4, the hero who's going to fight for the victim. And 5, the hope or the solution, what's a better future the hero offers.
Victim, threat, villain, hero, hope. Got it.
It takes the listener on a complete emotional journey.
And AOC's viral ad, the one that helped her beat Joe Crowley, the powerful incumbent, that ad follows the formula perfectly, doesn't it?
To a T. Let's break it down. It starts immediately establishing the victim, working families in New York, people struggling. The threat comes quickly. They can't afford to live there anymore. It signals crisis.
Okay.
The villain is named explicitly, Joe Crowley, the 10-term incumbent, representing the out-of-touch, entrenched system. Then the hero emerges, AOC herself, the outsider, the challenger. With that powerful tagline, it's time for one of us.
Right.
And the hope solution is clear. Real change, representation that understands the struggle. It hits every single emotional beat, makes her platform instantly relatable, her mission urgent.
Incredibly powerful. But that same instant digital world that amplifies stories, it also amplifies the mistakes, the slip-ups, the political gaffe.
Oh, absolutely. And a gaffe isn't just any old mistake. Michael Kinsley, the journalist, had that great definition. A gaffe is when a politician accidentally tells the obvious truth he isn't supposed to say.
Right.
Voters immediately see it as an unguarded moment, a peek behind the curtain at what the candidate really thinks when the script slips.
And if we're talking gaffes, Joe Biden comes to mind. He's been called the Lamborghini of political gaffes.
He is legendary for it, isn't he? That lack of filter. People often excuse it, oh, that's just Joe being Joe. But really, it often signals a lack of mindfulness, maybe a lack of emotional control under pressure.
And some of his examples are just cringeworthy failures of awareness.
Yeah. Remember when he told Chuck Graham, the state senator who used a wheelchair, to stand up, Chuck? Just completely forgot.
Oh.
Or that time in 2019 when he said, poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
Yikes.
Even if there's no malice intended, those moments land badly. They suggest a lack of awareness, maybe accidental condescension, or just not understanding your audience. Big problems.
And there are different types of this lack of control, this impulsivity that lead to these moments.
Yeah, the research breaks it down a bit. You got 3 negative kinds. Non-planning impulsivity, that's blurting things out without thinking. The classic verbal gaffe machine. Then attentional impulsivity, struggling to stay focused under pressure, getting easily distracted maybe by noise or fatigue. It makes you look weak or overwhelmed. And motor impulsivity, uncontrolled physical stuff, sighing loudly, eye-rolling, weird facial expressions or big physical outbursts, like Howard Dean's famous scream. It suggests you can't control yourself physically.
But we do want leaders who can think fast, adapt on the fly. What's the good version of that?
Right, the goal isn't to be a robot. The goal is functional impulsivity. That's the ability to think quickly, react effectively to the unexpected while staying composed and in control. It's the difference between panicking and pivoting. Gaffes are the enemy of functional impulsivity. They instantly confirm those voter fears about temperament control, whether it's looking silly in a tank or losing control of your face during a debate. So when we look back over this whole deep dive, starting with Dukakis looking lost in that giant helmet, all the way to someone like AOC, who has to perform this incredibly polished yet seemingly raw authenticity on Instagram, the core lesson is kind of the same, isn't it? That gap, the distance between what a politician intends to project and what the voter actually perceives, it often comes down to one single moment. A flicker of emotional failure, or maybe an unexpected flash of vulnerability. And with modern media, everything's faster, the reach is wider. Add in the brain science, emotion beating logic, and any slip-up. Being too canned, too arrogant, too out of touch, it just gets instantly amplified. Then confirmation bias locks it into place in the voter's mind. Set in stone.
The age of the perfectly polished, tightly controlled, hermetically sealed performance, it really does seem to be over. Voters are just incredibly sharp now at sniffing out anything that feels fake. And ultimately, we're not really voting for the candidate with the most detailed policy paper. We're committing to the person we feel we can trust to lead us when things get tough. And earning that trust, it takes that really deliberate, difficult balance. Strength shown through decisiveness, optimism, and warmth shown through empathy, humility, authenticity. So the enduring lesson, maybe, for anyone wanting to lead in this age of optics is this. The best performance is the one that doesn't look like a performance at all. We're drawn to people who seem real, even perhaps especially in their imperfections.